back to our show. We were just talking about competition in the real estate market. We've talked a little bit about competition in athletics with the Super Bowl coming up. But there's also competition in the workplace that some people have the ability to step up and accomplish, and some people maybe feel like they're not quite up to the task for many reasons, and maybe you're trying to find ways that they can get back into the game, per se. Dr. Kristen Allott joins us, a naturopathic doctor, acupuncturist, and founder of Dynamic Paths, who really practices treating people struggling with obesity, depression, anxiety, diabetes, and cardiovascular disease. But Dr. Allott, really right now we're talking about this ability for people to perform in the workplace.
Yes. So in the last couple of years, because of the change in the economy, I've really seen a change in my patients who are people coming in who are really not surviving in the workplace because of what they're saying is depression. And what studies show is that in a quarter, people who are depressed are losing about 11 and a half days of productivity, so 46 days in a year.
Which is a huge amount.
Huge amount.
It's like a quarter of your work.
Right.
You only work like 200 days a year, 220 days a year, I think.
Yeah, so it's about 17% to be precise, and that's going to be noticeable if you're looking for that next step up or not make the next cut and survive the next layoff round. Mm-hmm. People are going to notice that you're on the ball or not.
Yeah. Well, I think 17% of your work, I mean, you're looking at basically missing almost a day a week of productivity.
Exactly.
So what what is your background and how do you help people maybe navigate this? Because I'm sure there's people who go to work and are like thinking, man, that's probably me.
Yeah. So I have about 10 years of experience in mental health. 8 years ago, I formed my company, Dynamic Paths, and the tagline's non-pharmaceutical interventions for depression, anxiety, addictions, and other mental health concerns, sort of like what you said. And really, the people who came in to see me, because I'm a cash practice, is the people who had done lots of medications, a lot of psychotropic medications, lots of therapy, and it wasn't coming together. And I had this weird idea that if you feed a brain, like it'll work better. Mm-hmm. And so I kind of call myself the construction manager, and therapists are the feng shui specialists in the house, right?
Okay.
Keeping with the real estate metaphors. And so I really try and make sure that the brain's getting what it needs so that it can heal itself, because it does have self-healing mechanisms. But you have to know what the right questions are. And right now, if you're not feeling on top of your game, everybody just says they're depressed and they go get Prozac.
Well, it's hard not to. Every TV commercial that you watch, I think I've been told I've depressed at least twice per commercial break on every single show I watch.
You're like, oh, that's me.
Did you have a hard time waking up this morning? Yes, I did. Oh my God, I can eat that pill 3 times a day. And then I can add that one and it'll make it even better.
Exactly. And, the pressures of the economy, of not getting what you want. So discerning, is it a software problem? Is it a thought problem? Is it a hardware problem? Or is it the environment that you're in has become really toxic? And so having somebody help you discern that and what steps to take next, because when you're depressed, you don't want to take any steps. Right? It's really hard to put a strategy together. Mm-hmm. And so that's one of the things that I really want to help the business environment do better so that people can stay employed.
So I want to get into that and depression or fatigue in business and the impact and continue that. But you made an interesting comment, software versus hardware. And, Here we are in Seattle. Yeah. Can you elaborate a little bit on what you mean there?
So software to me is how you talk to yourself. So we all have voices in our heads that's not. Some people are like, oh, that's multiple personality. And like, no, we all got mom in there, and we probably have our boss in there, and they're hardwired in as the inner critic. And for depression, I'm really looking to see how harsh the inner critic is. Like, are they on you on everything? That's a software problem. And that's a time to go see a therapist. And what studies show is that if you meet with somebody 4 to 6 times, your absenteeism goes way down over the course of the year. So 4 to 6 hours versus missing whole days of work. Mm-hmm. That's an easy trade-off. And people are like, I don't want to go to a therapist. I don't want to talk about my childhood. Fine. Just go sit with them. It's going to help.
Now, to your point, there's a lot of this, maybe what you're doing, you're not going back into people's childhoods. You're kind of giving them...
I'm not.
Right.
I'm not. Therapists might.
But so talk about how you're feeding the brain in order to maybe change the way people are thinking about maybe what they're doing at work.
Right. So one of the things that I do is, to me, depression and fatigue are really hard to tease out. Like, you have to spend some time, because sometimes people come in saying they're depressed, and really they're fatigued. Because when I look at their diet, it's carbs, 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 carbs. Like, it's white things, white things, white things, white things. And our brain needs a lot of glucose, but it also needs nutrients. And so then educating people about how, in Seattle, we're pretty sophisticated about eating for cardiovascular disease, but that's not the same thing as mental health.
Because they put it on the box.
I know.
It's got a little heart on it, and it says, buy this, and you'll be heart healthy.
Yeah, and then you're doing something
and
good.
I watch Subway commercials. I'm good.
Yeah. Yeah. So, for instance, what I find is that if people eat protein at every meal, their brain's functioning better. Because protein is, instead of a quick fuel, protein's a slower burning fuel, and it allows us to stay around. When we just have carbs, our brain has nutrients for 2 hours max, and then it's tanking. Where, a protein will give you 3 to 4.5 hours. I mean, that in itself is going to change your day and your decisions. I've gone into a couple of businesses and done a 1-hour lecture on how to eat protein regularly. And what the owner said is they saw less absenteeism and more sales in the afternoon because people still had brains. That's the hardware piece. Like, if the electricity's turning on and off throughout the day, particularly in the afternoons, are you going to be productive?
Probably not.
Yeah. And you're going to be annoyed.
Yeah,
right?
Really annoyed. And I'm probably more narcoleptic than anything.
Yeah, exactly.
Is that what you do when you fall asleep? Narcoleptic?
Yeah,
Okay,
that's the right one.
I diagnose things wrong sometimes, the wrong words. Dr. Allott, so, you go in, you realize that you are potentially depressed, you realize that potentially you are fatigued, something is wrong, and now you realize maybe there's, you have been impacted in the workplace. You're not producing as much as maybe your manager wants, maybe it's your peers, whatever it may be. When people realize this, what's that first step for them to maybe take, to get out of the rut, per se? Right.
So the first step is to take a first step. And often people are like, I don't want to do meds, because they know if they go to their primary care physician and say, I'm depressed, Prozac, because the physician can prescribe that in 5 minutes, end of the game. They don't have to do blood work. They don't have to talk to you. Here you go. Have a nice life. You'll feel better in 6 weeks. And most people will feel better in 6 weeks, but it might not be sustained. So one of the things that when I talk publicly, I'm like, don't go into your doctor and say I'm fatigued, or say that you're depressed. Say that you're fatigued, because then the doctor actually has to talk to you and actually has to do a number of different labs. So they're much more than they're going to do for depression. And so maybe they're going to catch one of the physical causes.
Like, say, a sleep apnea.
Like sleep apnea, exactly. Like that's an excellent example. And so they're going to start problem solving with you and creating a strategy. And so that would be a first step. Or sometimes people are like, I don't want to talk that much.
I'm too tired.
I just want a quick answer. So they try meds.
Right.
Or they start with a therapist. Or maybe go see an acupuncturist or a naturopath on your insurance plan, just to get the ball rolling, because our brains function better in relationship. I mean, that's part of what I hear when I hear you talk about real estate. Part of the real estate agent's job is to form a relationship, because the brain functions better when you have somebody saying, here are the choices, right? And so if you're struggling in the workplace, you got to find somebody that you can confide in and say, we got to clean this up.
Well, in some ways, I think what I hear you're saying is sometimes you don't know what you don't know. So even taking that first step, you're like, you sit there and you're either tired or depressed, or you just don't feel right. And it could be around work. It could be around your family. It could be around looking for a house, which could be exhausting. And now you're thinking, geez, what's wrong with me? Yeah. Where's my moxie, man?
Yeah, exactly. And, in America, we have this, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, do it on your own. But, if you look in the business environment, that's not how good businesses are set up. You have supervisors and you have teams. So why don't we have teams for our health, teams for our well-being, teams so that we can move our lives forward in the direction that we want. And so really it's the first step is to at least get a team member on board that you can trust.
Mm-hmm. And when you talk about a team member, you can form teams around yourself in the office. You could form teams around yourself around, spirituality. You can form teams around yourself for health. There's so many different ways to go about this. And I don't think people take the time to do that either. Whether it's, if, I'm going to get a personal trainer and a nutritionist. Wow, that could probably make huge differences.
Exactly. And then I tell people, try their style for 3 months and see what cleans up. Mm-hmm. And if it didn't all clean up, say, okay, this cleaned up, but this didn't. Who's the next team member? Who's the next person who has the information that I need to clean this up? And but it takes putting it on the calendar and making it a priority, because the hard thing about depression and fatigue is you don't have the bandwidth. Mm-hmm. And so, sitting down and creating that strategy, just like you would in terms of your professional goals, and like, here, we're going to hit these goals by now. You can't always pin that down on mental health, but at least you're moving forward or not.
Well, and now that everybody's probably done with their New Year's resolution, they can start a new here in February.
A new February.
Dr. Kristen Allott joins us. And what about as an employer? What do you do as an employer if you see this within your employees? Because it'd be a little tough just like, God, I think you're depressed.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's a whole bunch of boundaries that an employer would have a problem crossing,
sure.
Right? And so one of the things that's coming up with a new healthcare law that's in place is health promotion, and really putting the time and energy to bring in speakers who can give your employees information about what good health is, and not they bring in people on how to optimize the workplace and systems like that. But how do you do that on health? Because our bodies and our brains are really our most important long-term investment. Because I don't know about you, but I intend to be employed for a long time based on what my brain's doing. And if I'm not taking care of my body, I'm not taking care of my brain, and the software is not going to work. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And so starting to do that, and for employers, educating themselves about what are the costs of depression and what are the things that set up depression in the workplace, so that they can create environments that make it possible for people to get help, or connecting them to employment assistant programs, or making sure that there are mental health services on the the health benefits package.
And I think what you're saying also is, as an employer, this comes full circle into more productivity.
Absolutely.
And so is that a measurable number that you can start to track as you go through this process?
I think it is.
Yeah.
And that that's where for me, where I'm moving my business is how to help more employers, because if we're making employment more healthy and people more healthy, there are lots of studies that health is infectious. Mm-hmm. Right? But that also means disease is infectious.
Nobody wants to be the fat guy.
Well, or the smoker. We've seen that with smoking. Yeah. Right? So if I'm a smoker, which I'm not, and you're not a smoker or a smoker, which I don't know.
I don't.
But if I quit smoking, it's more likely your best friend will quit smoking because I quit smoking. Because we've seen in studies that it's that level. So how do we raise?
Well, you empower. It's this element, I think, of education.
Right.
So, Dr. Allott, thanks so much for joining us. Really do appreciate it. Stick around for a few more minutes. I'd love to get some more of your opinions, and Mark Hobbs will join us along with Miss Heather Moore. We'll be right back after this break.